In this movie, we're going to look at the basics of activity diagrams. We'll look at how an activity models a workflow and how it's shown in a diagram, how that diagram has a beginning and an end in the form of initial and final nodes, how the activity diagram is made up of actions or activities, and how those actions or activities are connected with control flows. An activity diagram models a workflow at some level, as we've seen in the movie about the purpose of activity diagrams. A workflow is a sequence of actions, some of which are themselves activities, or technically speaking structured activities, and which are connected together. The actions are executable nodes in the diagram, and the diagram also shows control nodes, which control the flow through the actions, and object nodes, which provide or receive data. An activity diagram shows one or more activities, usually one activity. The activity is shown as a round-cornered rectangle, enclosing the other elements of the diagram, with its name at the top. In a lot of cases, this enclosing activity is missed out or implied. In most cases, there will be an initial node, which shows where the activity starts, and a final node, which shows where it ends. The initial node is a small black circle, while the final node is a circle with a smaller black circle in the center. These are both types of control node. An activity is made up of a number of actions or activities, which technically are structured activities. The actions or activities are shown in round-cornered rectangles inside the activity. Each action or activity has a name, which should clearly describe what is being done. As such, they usually have an active verb and then some noun phrase, which is the object of the verb. Actions are the fundamental units of behavior, so we can't decompose them into lower-level activity diagrams. They're executable nodes. Activities are only shown in the workflow in activity diagrams if they're structured activities, which are themselves a type of action. We use structured activities for workflows that show high-level processes, where we may want to decompose the activities into lower-level diagrams. This would be for modeling business processes or using activity diagrams to specify a use case. The examples here show the use of active verbs and noun phrases, such as remove, a verb, faulty devices, a noun phrase. We use actions for modeling low-level activities, for example, when specifying operations. The actions in an activity diagram are connected together by control flows. The control flows are open-headed arrows joining each action to the one that follows it. So here's a simple activity diagram to specify a use case. And we take the same approach with control flows in low-level activity diagrams that show actions. So here's a simple activity diagram to specify an operation. Let's produce one in Enterprise Architect now. So here we are in Enterprise Architect. Activity diagrams are often used to specify use cases, and that's what we'll do for a first example. We'll start with a use case in the administration package, which is called Query Device and Sensor Status. I'm going to add a child diagram, as we did with sequence diagrams and communication diagrams. So I right-click on the use case, select New Child Diagram, Activity, and With Activity Diagram. I'll give it the same name as the use case, Query Device and Sensor Status. And here we are in the activity diagram. The first thing I'm going to do is to add an activity from the toolbox to enclose the workflow. To be honest, you don't see this very much in activity diagrams, but we'll start off by doing it as the UML specification states it should be. I click in the toolbox on Activity and click in the diagram. I'll name the activity the same as the activity diagram and use case. Now I'll add an initial node and a final node from the toolbox. Enterprise Architect gives these default names. We don't need those. Typically, you would use names on initial nodes to reflect the event that triggers the workflow. And you might use names on final nodes if there are different final nodes in the same diagram with different outcomes that you want to distinguish. I just drag them from the toolbox and put the initial node at the left-hand end and the final node at the right-hand end. Now I'm going to add 3 activities from the toolbox. I click on Activity in the toolbox and then on the diagram pane. I could add structured activities at this stage, but we'll come to them in detail in a later movie. The first activity is Display all devices and sensors. The second is going to be Remove faulty devices. And the third is Remove faulty sensors. Now I can connect them up with control flows. I'll use the quick linker, although I could use activity relationships from the toolbox. I'm adding control flows each time. Make sure you connect them in the right direction. And there you are, we have our first activity diagram. It's quite basic, but it contains initial and final nodes and a sequence of activities joined together by control flows.